Welcome to the Canadian Business Quarterly podcast, where we speak with Canada's most influential industry leaders on the business and economic development issues taking place across the country. You can stay up to date with all of our content, including our publications, newsletters, and podcasts by visiting www.thecbq.ca and clicking on subscribe.
Today's guest is Juli Hodgson, president of Hodgson Design Associates, otherwise known as HDA. Juli established HDA in the early 1990s and has been expanding her portfolio of residential, retail, and restaurant work ever since. Western Living magazine has twice awarded her Designer of the Year, while Dwell, House and Home, and Style at Home have all paid tribute to her signature luxurious yet relaxed West Coast modern flair and exceptional integration of indoor and outdoor spaces. HDA's latest project is the spectacular 7,000 square foot design build on Beachview Road overlooking Indian Arm. Juli, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So, can you give us an overview of Hodgson Design Associates, please?
We're a small boutique firm. There's about 10 employees, combination of architects and interior designers. And we mostly do residential, and we do have a certain style that we're known for. It's kind of like a West Coast modern, but not austere modern, not completely bare modern, more of a warm, inviting modern.
And so what are the range of services that you guys provide and offer?
Well, we do everything really. We'll do renovations, or we do a lot of new builds from the ground up. So we provide the architectural services, all of the coordination and the interior design. And a lot of times we also do the landscape design. So we're pretty full service. Anything else?
So, I mean, if you're full service, is there anything else that you think you do differently from, other architecture firms in your space?
I think what sets me personally apart is that I have a construction background. So I understand a lot about building, which I've spent a lot of time on sites. I've spent a lot of time coordinating and project managing. And so I have a really good understanding of how the building goes together and what the critical aspects of it are, and also where to and not to spend money.
Okay. And so how does that affect your philosophy for design then with that sort of background?
Well, my philosophy is not to, it's most people when they're building a house, it's their single most expensive endeavor that they'll do in their life. And so it's important to them to get it right the first time and not to spend money, not to get budget fatigue. So not to spend money unnecessarily. So it's not really about me. It's really about the client and their needs.
Okay. Do you want to take us through how that impacts some of your recent and significant projects?
Yeah, well, most of the recent projects have been impacted by inflation, really. And things are becoming so expensive that we've had to find ways to, do things more efficiently. It just means that you've got to look harder and longer for the right materials and take advantage of knowing when to buy things, where to buy them, and work hard to get the best products for the best possible price. But it hasn't really impacted the overall look of what we do or the function. It's just harder on the clients to, like I had a house that we prepared a budget for in early 2021, and it was $600 a square foot. That house is now coming in at $1,100 a square foot. It's just completing. And one of the layers in the whole building process is the approvals layer, which is extremely difficult in Vancouver. There's just so many requirements from the municipality for submitting building permit plans, development permit plans, and getting approvals. So it could take on one house, the house we're doing on Indian Arm, it took 18 months to get a permit. In that 18 months, building costs have gone up 30%. So the approval process and the municipality, they really affect how the building process is going.
Well, do you want to take us through some of the, the recent projects that you've done? So for people who don't know your firm, do you want to share a little bit of the work that you're doing and maybe give us a bit of a, case study on some of the work that you've been involved in recently?
Well, when I started my business, I was lucky to get two very prominent clients that sort of launched it. Mm-hmm. So one was Middle Beach Lodge in Tofino, which has become world famous, and I got a lot of traction from that particular job because it was such a comfortable and relaxing place to be. People really wanted their houses to feel like that. That was a style that was driven by the client and not necessarily by my own personal style, but it really worked out for him and the success of his business. And then the other one was, for 13 years, I designed Aritzia stores. So that's now turned into a multi-billion-dollar business, and it's very high profile across North America. I no longer do Aritzia because they took their design in-house, and I didn't just want to design retail. I wanted a more broad practice. So, but the stores are still really beautiful, and they do a great job. But that's kind of what started my firm. And then I got into residential, and then I wanted more control over the building of it. So we got more into architecture. And I work very closely with an architect, a registered architect, Sean Best, who has his own company. But he and I do all of our projects together, and he's very talented. Yeah.
Okay. And is there anything that you've, I think in the introduction, we talked about one of your projects, anything that you've completed recently that you might like to, make mention of?
Well, I really like my own house. It's on Collingwood Street, but one of my favorite projects is a house on our website. It's called Gallery House, and it was for a client who was a really big art collector. But he didn't want to build a new house. He wanted to downsize, but he didn't want to build a new house because he was so afraid of the whole approval process. So he wanted to buy a house and renovate it. And I had this house that I had been in when I was younger. It belonged to a friend of mine. And I always looked at that house and thought, if I could get my hands on this house, I could turn it into a really spectacular showpiece. And it was by fluke that this client called me and said, can you look at a house for me? I had done work for his son. And I said, sure. So he took me to look at a house he wanted to buy, and he sort of ran through the program of what he wanted. And it to me, it didn't make sense in that house. And I said, I don't think this is the right house for you, but I know of a house that's going on the market this weekend, and I think you should buy that house. And I told him who owned the house, who the owner was. And he said, well, I know her. And he went and knocked on her door. And she said, what are you doing here? And he said, I want to buy your house. My designer said that I should buy this house. And she said, it's not even going on the market until Saturday. And he said, how much do you want for it? And she told him, and he offered her, I think, something like $500,000 over her asking price. I'm not exactly sure how much, but quite a bit. And so they made a deal, a handshake deal, and he bought the house. And it was a massive, extensive renovation and addition. We added on to it, and we created this gallery space for his art, which was really important, and also his collection of books.
So we've already talked about issues around inflation on some of the projects that you're doing. Outside of that, are there any other issues or challenges that are impacting the architecture industry?
Well, I think there are challenges across the board. Approvals is the big challenge. Cost is another big challenge. Land, there's a shortage of land in Vancouver. The city is now encouraging single families lots not to be single family anymore, which is obviously a great thing because we need housing, desperately need housing. But now I think it's coming up a new regulation. If you buy a single family house, you get penalized in your total allowable square footage if you just build one unit on it. So they're trying to encourage multiple units on single family properties, which isn't necessarily bad. I mean, it's probably good that they're encouraging people to build more units, and that hopefully will bring down the cost of housing.
Excellent. So, Juli, before we finish up today, is there anything else that you haven't had a chance to address or otherwise discuss?
Well, I think things are changing in the design business. I think the policy of energy is a big one. Pretty soon you won't be allowed to have a fireplace. You're no longer allowed to have a gas furnace. You can't have in-floor radiant heat anymore. A lot of things that people really got used to and really like, they can no longer put in their houses. The size of windows is going to get smaller. We're at step 3 right now. I think it's going to step 4. And it's going to be more difficult to design creatively. You're going to be more driven by the regulations than creativity.
Okay. Well, Juli, I appreciate your time today.
Okay. Well, thanks for getting in touch.
Thank you.
This has been a production of the Canadian Business Quarterly, a division of Romulus Rising Proprietary Limited. All rights reserved. You can stay up to date with the Canadian Business Quarterly, including our publications, newsletters, and podcasts by visiting www.thecbq.ca and clicking on subscribe.